Hello and welcome to day 3 of ENDORSE, the European Data Conference on Reference Data and Semantics. You're very welcome. Today's theme is procurement and interoperability. So please do share this information on social media, on Twitter. Use the hashtag ENDORSE 2021 and keep an eye out for texts and tweets from the EU Law Data Pubs, EU Publications, EU_Open Data and EU Lex, because they will be sharing information about our speakers. We've got 3 tracks again today, so there will be things happening simultaneously, so that's a way for you to keep an eye on what's going on in the other sessions. And of course, all these sessions will be recorded and will be shared, so don't feel you're missing out. If you have to choose between 2 exciting topics, you can of course come back and have a look at the ones after the event. So I know there was a lot of interaction yesterday on Slido. We're going to do that again today. So what you do is you go to slido.com in your browser. There's no need to download anything, or you can open up the app on your phone if you wish, and you can put in the code ENDORSE 2021. And there you should see a poll. I'm going to have a look as well. Let's see what we've got. We have got, yes, we are going to ask a question asking you about what do you expect from today in one word. So give us your expectations. We'll be very interested to see what your anticipation is, especially as we are now on to day 3. So many of you will be old hands at this and know exactly what to expect. Now, yesterday we looked at approaches to making ontologies for legal information, practical applications of semantic tech, how to make the most out of a taxonomy for improving findability, as well as also looking at legal visualization. We covered a huge amount of ground and we aim to do the same again today. So, with that, let me introduce our first 2 speakers who are going to talk about achieving simplicity in transacting, the role of contracts in our society, and how we can model the EU economy via contracts. So please welcome Sally Geyer, Global Chief Executive Officer for the World Commerce and Contracting WordCC, and Luigi Telesca, co-founder and CEO of TRAKTI and CEO of EXRADE. Luigi, you're going to kick things off, so over to you.
Hi, everyone. I actually would like to thank the organizer for this opportunity. And for me as Sally, it's a great honor to be here. Actually, we are going to present you the activity from Open Trust Fabric, and I pass the token to my colleague Sally to start.
Thank you, Luigi, and I believe you have slides that you're going to be ready to share. Wonderful, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Luigi and I are really delighted to be here and presenting to you on the critical role of contracts in our society today. As Chief Executive of World Commerce and Contracting, I am a self-confessed contracts geek. I'm not going to suppose that I'll give Luigi the same name. But they do play a really critical role in our society today. And what we want to talk to you about is how we can use contracts to model economies. This is a fascinating study, and we're really excited to be sharing some of our findings with you today. So a very quick look at the agenda. We're going to talk about how we measure the economy, what the role of contracts is, this real issue of data, this data challenge, and some of the preliminary results that we have come up with to date. So first of all, let me talk to you about what and who is Open Trust Fabric. Essentially, Open Trust Fabric is a friendly and informal alliance of organizations and individuals who are committed to establishing an inclusive ecosystem, an ecosystem of contributors who together will develop tools and methodologies for both reporting the economy as an ecosystem of contracts and actually implementing it. Our objective is to connect the legal, accounting, and business functions into a united system, interfacing between these 3 often very disparate worlds. We really want to support a dynamic visualization of the economy through contracts. And we want to support improvement of inter-organizational relationships and operations. So a very brief history on the project to date. In 2019, we started the original feasibility study, and this was presented at the EU and published in the European Journal. So it is available for you all to read. And of course, we would commend that to your reading. And then in June of 2020, we moved on from the feasibility study to begin the methodological study. And of course, we also initiated the Open Trust Fabric initiative. Again, all of this information is available to you on the Open Trust Fabric website, including a link to the first feasibility study as well. So we need to make sense of data, and we need to do so through contracts. Contracts connect legal, accounting, and business. We've recognized that there is a need to measure things differently. We have a massive opportunity here, and certainly the first feasibility study led us to that conclusion. What was then really interesting was, of course, the feasibility study was initiated before the pandemic. COVID-19 struck globally in 2020, creating dramatic levels of economic and social disruption. Among its many impacts, it revealed the fundamental weaknesses in critical data flows, the absence of visibility into complex supply chains, and the fragmented nature of organizational design. So for business and for commerce, it widened the cracks that were already visible, but in many cases had been ignored or dismissed as too difficult to fix. The belief that politics, society, and economics are out of balance is not new. And now we have an opportunity to look at how we can impact the economy, measure the economy differently. So why is there an opportunity? Well, let's just take a very brief look at past, present, and future. In the past, it has all been about static representation, data reflecting standards, goods, and services, and not really capturing these welfare gains from innovation. We've shifted into a world now of servification, of digitalization of services, and the future is exciting. Technology is creating exciting platforms for us. New economic indicators are coming to the fore. The ability to implement real-time monitoring. But we need better policies to support that future that we see. So what about GDP then? Efficient? Absolutely. A very efficient, impressive reporting tool. But when you look back at our past, present, and future, we realize that GDP doesn't cover everything. It is anchored to the past. So why might contracts be better? Well, let's have a look. With the evolution of today's economy from industry and manufacturing to services, information, and networks, GDP and similar economic measurement approaches really struggle to account for the intangible structures and assets of today's economy. The modern economy is increasingly based on networks, services, and insights. And whilst GDP and generally accepted accounting principles remain important measures, they don't model the increasingly important elements of economic activity and growth. In a world dominated by the internet and technology giants, it's a real challenge for the European Commission and other policy and regulatory bodies to assess this and manage this fragmentation, this inaccessibility of data, and this inconsistency of current indicators to support legislative and decision-making activities across this broad range of policy areas. So we want to create a better framework for policy making and monitoring, data needs to be leveraged and current economic indicators enhanced with network and contract information that much better models the modern economy, provides a way to really test and assess the impacts of policies. And why can we use contracts? Well, this was, and this concept is one of my favorites. Contracts are and should be boundary objects. They can provide a rich modeling framework. You know, contracts first and foremost are economic instruments, but unfortunately, they have become over the years very confused and confusing. Contracts do serve many purposes. They may be used by particular groups to support specific interests, but the important thing here is the recognition of contracts as these communication tools, as boundary objects, really connecting multiple worlds. So, Luigi, if we move on, and you'll see some of these quotes from our interim report that we have produced, again, recognizing. And this first quote comes from, in fact, the Nobel Prize Award Committee back in 2016 when Oliver Hart and Bent Holmstrom won the Nobel Prize for Economic Science, where they talked about contracts being foundational artifacts for the structuring and organization of our world. Contracts are indeed tools that are capable of enhancing cooperation. Unfortunately, what we find today is that contracts are very often not the boundary objects that they need to be. Research by World Commerce and Contracting has found that almost 90% of business users find contracts difficult or impossible to understand, meaning that they're often ignored for organizational purposes. But let's just quickly go back to that point about contracts being first and foremost economic instruments. Contract economics is about understanding the cost of contract creation, the financial impacts of risk allocation and acceptance, and then the managerial costs associated with contracting. We enter into contracts for financial benefit, whether we're on the buy side or the sell side. And so it goes to say that contracts are tools that are instrumental in supporting modern ways of measuring our economy. Luigi, let me hand over at this point to you so that we can go further into the importance and the critical role that contracts can play.
Thank you, Sally. As you correctly said, contracts should be important because sometime and today, especially in our economy, they are not considered so important, and they actually are used just at the beginning to establish the relation, but then they disappear into the chaos of information and data and the way we are processing. The point is that contracts are relevant in order to establish the link and the connection between peers, between nodes of our economy. And they are even more important if we start using them in the right way. So contracts should matter. And they should matter because we are now surrounded by data, information, system, and we need to make sense of this data. And the point is that if we try to make sense of data without a schema and understanding, this will be extremely complicated and will use a lot of resources and information and structure and computational capabilities in order to make sense of this information. Why instead we don't use contracts as we should use them in order to create artifacts and information that are more defined, better, and easy to understand also from a human being point of view. Contracts are human readable. So data sometimes is very difficult to dig into, while contract, they provide a schema, a framework for understanding and study the reality. So we see the PROS object model, our contribution as Open Trust Fabric, as a baseline in order to start using contract in the right way, and then to understand data in a very precise and structured form that could give us the pillars, the right tools in order to basically to understand the economy with through and to see the economy through different lenses. These could actually lead us to understanding where the value creation, especially connected with intangible information and data is, and actually how also to help policymakers in order to make sense of data, in order also to design better policies and test and validate the idea faster. So contracts are important, but also contracts should connect. So contracts should connect what exactly? The links and connection with the law, regulatory aspect, directives and standards should be natively connected to the contract and should be trackable, easy to understand. At the same time, vertical domain and community information should be also connected to contracts because there are data standards, technical specification, legal and domain standards, and also service provisioning standards that are defined at that level. And furthermore, procedures at corporate level could be connected also to those kind of contract implementation. The only point that today we are not able to dig and understand this information because this is only blurb into a piece of paper that even if it is a PDF is not data driven. And so the resolution of the information between those points is very complicated. So the idea is that with the Open Trust Fabric, we want to provide still a human readable approach towards contract model and standard, but the easy way to connect the dots between which kind of law regulation directly company specification we provide is going to be easy since the beginning of the definition of the contract I'm going to use to establish a relation. And when the contract is going to be negotiated and executed, the usage of data, the generation of data from subsystem or other system can be easily reconciliated because this is a PROS object infrastructure. What does it mean for us? It means that we need to start seeing contract in a different way. Contract should be seen as PROS object graphs that are performing in an ecosystem where actually we have entities, we have data, we have information, but then we are also able to connect the dots between what is at stake into the contract, which kind of assets are under negotiation within a contract. Are those assets trackable? Are they defined? Do they have an ID? Are the trading of those assets is generating events, data, information, transaction, transfer? Where those information are happening, where they are stored? Are they stored into a physical infrastructure? Can we connect this information easily? And then if there is an algorithm running some code running some automation, can we exactly know which contract is using which algorithm? This information can be possible. Now, we don't want to bind all those information into a single system. We just want to provide a generative layer that is able to identify and route the information in the right way. And this is exactly what happened in the past with the internet. So what we have seen in the adoption of the internet with the TCP/IP protocol has been basically a flourishing of the internet economy because of this simple interoperable layer that has been given in order to facilitate services that are more complicated or domain driven and can actually give a lot of information to user and can give us the opportunity, even if we are not physically together, to share information and knowledge. So this pivotal role that has been played by the IP protocol is more or less what we're looking to do with the Open Trust Fabric and OTF PROS object model. This could be basically a generative layer to open up the connection between the data world and the contract world with easy to process, let's say, interoperable framework. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It has to be simple. It has to be human readable and should be able to connect the dots between the data world and the contract world, the legal world and accounting world. Why it is so important? Because we can start understanding data and ecosystem in a different way. So we can see nodes as the parties involved into the contract and into usage of some technology. And we can see the edges as contracts that are providing not just a picture, a snapshot of a specific information that we share or a transaction, are providing and establishing the rules of the game among those parties, and also the perspective that we are currently missing in the GDP view. So this is very important because contract can give context to a relation, as said by Sally before. And also we can dimension those edges, those connection points, based on intensity of transaction, based on intensity of relation, based on even intangible elements that are at stake during the transaction. And then we can see the direction. So it is a symmetrical relation, it is asymmetrical, it is something that is enforcing both parties or not. All those information are very important if we are planning the economy and we want to provide better context to that. So what we have done so far, we've been analyzing data, transactional data coming from ecosystem, supply chain ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, and platform economy, platform data. And because of that, we have been able to connect those with contracts and basically understand and analyze findings and common properties that are shared between ecosystem infrastructures, data generated, and contract information. And because of that, we have been able to develop a theoretical model that actually matches the data and the way contracts are enhancing the information. This gives an opportunity for policymakers to basically identify common benefits and economic benefit and to run on in silico experiments with data and contract infrastructure. And we are doing this in an open way. So we are defining an ontology for the Open Trust Fabric that is shared into a tool like GitHub that everyone can access. The idea is that all the contract models and standards will be shared, and every community can develop a contribution into the standard through the OTF, and this will generate a lot of standardization and models that could be used by others to reference information into single contracting phases. So what we have is the capability to create an open repository of contract models that can actually be connected with an analysis and simulation framework based on contract data and transactional data. During contracting phase, people can connect and use those templates in order to have this kind of easy to understand model. They can still keep their data private, but they can also share the information with policymakers if they want. And we will also are providing a distributed ledger infrastructure in order to record this data in an anonymous format. This can give the possibility for policymakers and also for scientists to study data having the right information and the right structure in place. This will simplify the activity and understanding of the economy. As Sally said before, we have been doing these with different use cases in mind. One, and the major use case has been analyzing platform and analyzing platforms and the impact of platform on the economy. We have seen the impact, for example, of pandemic into those ecosystem by reading the amount of contracts signed during a period of time. And as you can see, we can see, for example, for the city of Amsterdam, the impact of the pandemic and COVID-19 into the number of contracts signed within an ecosystem like Airbnb. And those information have been mapped and analyzed with our algorithm and with our data system in place, data analytic system in place. And we are able now to scale up not only to a single city, but to the entire ecosystem of data coming from the Airbnb. In this case, we can see 7 cities, how they have been represented through contracts in our infrastructure. Not only that, we also can try to understand even localization and insight about, for example, the impact of geographical location of companies that are responding to a specific request. And this information can actually be very important to understand, for example, how the value of proximity is also relevant in establishing a trusted relation within a contract infrastructure. Now, the way we have been able to do this is not only just by analyzing data, but analyzing data through the lenses of contracts. And this is giving a lot of insight that we want to apply in a specific use cases. The first one is, for example, trying to understand why company valuation are so different, even, for example, the service they provision is more or less similar. Which kind of elements is at stake, for example, between those companies? Why the market cap of those companies so different, even if the revenues are, for example, sometime better than in one case on the other. So there is something at stake that is actually happening because those companies are able to manage contractual relation in a different way. So what we have done in the consortia is to dissect a little bit the information, not only from a technical point of view, but also from a contractual point of view, and also from a functioning point of view, in order to understand what is the difference between those operational model. And what we found out is that companies, they can not only optimize the way they work, but also they can capitalize from assets that at the moment are not tracked by the system. So, for example, competencies that we can integrate into a multi-sided platform, for example, or asset and resources that we can collect with a distributed approach, or using relation to actually extend our supply network because, for example, we are able to let them engage with our operational model. So all those things at the moment can be tracked through contractual relation. And this is what we are looking for with the OTF. So if we consider contracts and the way we implement contracts, we can also decide how good we want to be and also which kind of relational coefficient we want to achieve. And then how we can connect this contract through the lenses of an ecosystem. And those 2 dimensions, so one is more how we want to establish a relation with the counterpart, and the other one, how we want to implement collaboration in our ecosystem, are affecting the contract value in a specific way. And this is what we are focusing our attention on. Sally.
Yeah, thank you, Luigi. I think the previous example that you shared was just really fascinating. You know, Airbnb effectively is an intermediary, but it has its genesis from making available existing unused capacity, such that it's largely a payment platform, and whilst all 3 of the models operate in the same space, they've adopted very different approaches in their conscious design and also the user experience. And it provides us with a really interesting view of how intangibles are evolving over time, and the importance then of understanding, as you rightly say, Luigi, the relationship models. This study has really brought to the fore the ability for us to connect the increased digitization of the contracting environment with then the nature of the relationship that is truly required. And again, the pandemic has thrown open to us the tremendous opportunity, the tremendous weaknesses and fragility in our contracting ecosystems that can be effectively supported through greater level of relational indicators and as the slide confirms, connectedness indicators as well. So the importance of recognizing the impact of technology and relationship on our future. So we're looking to join forces, to partner. We're looking for people to contribute to Open Trust Fabric. We continue as a consortium to undertake research, to continue with this study. We are bringing together working groups to assess and understand levels of standardization across different industries, and how we can continue to evolve this methodological study to a reality. Luigi, do you want to add to our desire for more involvement to encourage others to get involved?
Yeah, I think this conference is an amazing opportunity for us and also for all the scientists that are working on data to join forces, because the opportunity that we have in front of us are huge. But there is a way to contribute from different angles, and our approach is wants to leverage on the already knowledge developed by different communities and standard bodies and associations that are already working in standardizing data and developing data analytic frameworks that could scale, to actually join forces in a kind of an open consortia and umbrella that could share and connect the dots between the contract world, the accounting world, and the data scientist world. This is needed because what we learned so far is that data is not enough if we don't have the right framework in order to connect the dots between the different elements. And the fact that in the Open Trust Fabric, we have been able to put together this framework by joining resources and competencies from data scientists' point of view, and we have the colleagues from InfoCamera working with us, and there is the team working on contracts that is modeling those contracts in a very, very sophisticated way. And the fact that by collaborating, we have been able to put together an analytical framework that is very, let's say, innovative. This basically gave us the opportunity to say, okay, if we have done this in our consortia, we can extend this. We want to learn from others, and we want to join forces all together. So this is, I think, the call in order to cooperate and to build a better future for Europe through data and through contracts. So if you want to stay and to get in touch with us, it's super easy. You can contact us on info@opentrustfabric.org. You can also visit our website, and you can connect with us on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I think we hope we have been able to show you the activities that we are doing, and we are happy to join forces. Please contact us. And yeah, it's time for question, I think.
Thank you very much, both of you. We do indeed have a question for you from our audience. And a reminder to everyone watching that you can send those questions via Slido. Just put them in the Q&A section and we'll try to give them to our speakers. Thank you for the great presentation. So that was the start. What would be the best place for interested parties to learn more about the POSE objects and engage in the discussion? I think you probably answered that a little bit.
Yeah, the first thing is you can connect with us through the site and through our channels, and then we have working groups that are actually already operating on the cross-object model. There is a GitHub repository that is already available where actually you can see some of those examples. Now we are basically trying to work with specific communities that already have standards. So we can focus on those standards and reporting those standards with the OTF approach.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go now and have a look at some more questions. Is there a link to the Airbnb study mentioned? Sally, I think you mentioned that.
We have got lots of information about the Airbnb case study, absolutely. And yes, if you go to the Open Trust Fabric website, there are links to the shorter stories around Airbnb. And we're also continuing to run webinars and other events. So best way to connect with all of this information is through OTF.
Okay, another question is, do you see a channel of making the PROS model accessible at SME level?
Yeah, the idea is to create, the model has to be as simple as possible. So the idea is that this generative model is going to facilitate their usage. So when a company is starting, for example, a negotiation or a new contract, can actually refer to all the standards that are already available without basically a barrier to entry. The idea is to make it contract accessible tools for everyone, even small and nano companies.
Okay, thank you. I think that you've covered all those questions there, and there's a link in the Slido to some of the answers that the people on how to get the PROS model accessible. So you can follow that. That's GitHub there, and I think that is you having answered all our questions, Luigi. So I think Sally and yourself, thank you very, very much. Have you any final words you wanted to give us to take away?
All I would say is this is just such a fabulous and exciting study. You know, contracts are the lifeblood of business. Trade is unique to humans, fundamental to human progression, and of course, fundamental to economies as well. So the opportunity to really step into the future through this study is very, very exciting. And we look forward to sharing more and more about this work over the course of the next few months and years, hopefully too.
Well, thank you very much to both of you. Let's turn now back to our Slido question that we asked at the very beginning of the day, requesting you to tell us what you were expecting. So learning, there you go. And of course, interoperability is the key word for the next, well, for the 4 days of our whole event. Knowledge, real use cases. We'll hopefully get you some of those this afternoon. Information, EU IT alternatives. We'll have to probe some of our speakers for that, and knowledge graph as well. You can keep putting those in there while we move on to our different tracks. Now, let's just remind you how that all works. You may have registered, in which case you will have a link in your registration email, or you can scroll down and select on the page which track you want to follow. They will, of course, all be recorded, so even you can't watch the two at the same time, but you can come back and look at recordings afterwards. So we urge you to do that. So with that, we're going to take a very quick break to get into our tracks and choose which one you want to find out about for today.